Hi, and welcome to the Sit Down with Suzanne podcast. I am your host, Suzanne. I am a author, a minister, a life coach, a motivational speaker, and a leader with over 20 odd years of experience leading multi-million dollar corporations. And I am here for your listening pleasure. I am also here to introduce a phenomenal young lady. So for those of you that have been following along, and I hope you all have been, the Phenomenal Woman series premiered last year during Black History Month, and I spoke to four phenomenal Black women. And back by popular demand, I got so many requests to redo the series. And this year, we did get off to a little bit of a late start, but I am very, very excited because we started the season off. We already have one episode out under our belt, and I chatted with a phenomenal woman, Miss Parley Jones. So there is a little bit of a story because if you listen to that one, I talked a little bit about her daughter, Medina, and for the very first time, we have a daughter of a phenomenal woman who's also a phenomenal woman herself. So, welcome, Medina.
Thank you. Thank you. Peace. And thank you for the kind words.
No problem. So Medina, I talked yesterday about Shayeja being my first auntie when I came to Massachusetts, being welcoming, being the first advocate that I knew, the first activist that I knew, the first, one that was just unapologetic about teaching our history and demanding our space. And she raised this little warrior. And I met this little kid that was following her mother around way back when. And it's just so beautiful to see you come into your own. You left us briefly to go away to college. You have traveled. You're back. And one of the reasons why I chose you for the Phenomenal Woman series, I think that everything that your mom is giving you is fantastic. And, you've been doing a lot of things behind the scene for years. But last year, I really saw you step out and took your place, as now the forerunner are at the forefront, or the president, I don't know what the title is, of our story edutainment, and what that meant for you to stand up as a young Black woman for, the protests and racial equality and all that. So that's one of the reasons I was so impressed. I was so blown away, because sometimes we have these blinders on, right? We see the little kid. And always, you'll always be the little kid to me, no matter what. Even when you're president of this country, you will be that little girl that I saw. So, welcome. I'm so excited that you're here. I'm so excited that you said yes, and that you're part of the our story here. So, in your own words, just talk to me a little bit and tell us who you are, so our viewers can hear.
Word. So again, I'm Shayeja Medina. My auntie knows me well, and when folks call me Medina, that means they've known me since I was a peanut. And my mom is Shayeja Mecca, or Parley Jones, and I'm Shayeja Medina. So again, my mom came back from New York City with two little Black babies in hand, and wanted us to see ourselves and our culture reflected in everything that we did. So coming up, I supported in her vision in making our Bob Marley birthday bash happen, participating in our Kwanzaa celebrations, a number of youth, activism programs, and so on and so forth. I went away to college. I graduated from Worcester Technical High School. I'm from the city of Worcester, K through 12, all the way up. Graduated from Worcester Technical High School and thought I was going to major in something business related, finance, so on and so forth. I went to college. I spent 2 years majoring in management. And a week before I was supposed to sign my paper declaring my major, I was like, this is not what my spirit is supposed to be doing. This is not my calling. I'm good at this. I can do this. My advisor actually didn't refuse to sign my slip, because he's like, you're making a horrible mistake. You're so great at this. And I decided it was no longer my calling. And I decided to major in Africana, or critical Black studies, and urban education. And I have a minor in geography. So all of those things are big fancy ways to say focusing on Black history, both in America, the Caribbean, and Africa, and the world, quite frankly. Urban education says, we know our students need a different kind of love, care, and attention that we need to give to them. And geography is the study of space, how the city is set up, where the bus routes go, why this park bench is here and not here. And all of these things seem really small in our everyday, day-to-day lives, but people put a lot of thought into what resources are where and who lives in what neighborhood and so on and so forth. So when I graduated, I inherited the 15 plus year legacy and work of my mom. And I am now the leader, the executive director, if that's what you want to call it, of Our Story Edutainment. And I'm really excited to maintain the traditions that we have done and incorporate some new programs into our work and see how we can expand and continue to reach people and raise consciousness in the city and anywhere we choose to go.
All right, wonderful. So tell me, what was it like growing up with, Parley as a mom? Because, you're going to school, they're teaching you one history, and then, you're coming home and she's like, okay, that is not the history. Let me teach you this. So you're learning essentially in school and at home. And, most students are probably like, there's just too much learning and things like that. So what was it like growing up and getting a separate education from what you were being taught in school?
Sure. So I think for me, I thought that everyone had a mom like Parley Jones. I thought everyone had this village this group of folks who were not blood related to, but who were able to say, does your mom know where you are? You sure if I call her right now, she's going to tell me it's okay that you're here? And I thought everyone had that until I went to college. And I was like, Ma, do you know that people don't know what Kwanzaa is? People have never celebrated Bob Marley. People don't know anything about Black history. And I didn't realize what a privilege that was until I went away to college and was around Black folks who did not have that. So I think it's a blessing and a curse in the best way, because obviously when Black people understand themselves and their history and where we come from and our powerful ancestors, it means that we walk through the world with our head up and in an upright position and nobody could tell us nothing. But it also meant that I had to sit there and be like, you're lying. I know you're lying. You're not telling the truth and you're not talking about these people. Why didn't I learn about Marcus Garvey? I love him. My mama always tells me about him. So trying to navigate that as a kid was a little difficult, obviously, but it's as a grown woman, I'm deeply grateful to have lived in that duality so that I can continue to be conscious young and try and bring other young people into this work and into this conscious state, so we can try and help our folks restore ourselves to our traditional greatness, as Dr. Malana Karenga says, who is the founder of Kwanzaa.
All right.
Good and bad in the best ways.
It is. No, wonderful. And, you mentioned everybody knowing each other. It reminds me, where we are from the island, like everybody knew your parents and like just having respect for your elders and, walking from the bus stop to your home, you have to say hi and acknowledge every single adult that you pass. And, my dad was Mas Clifton and everybody there, and, Mr. Mas Clifton Pitney, and, she never say hi. And, and you better make sure you come correct. So it was a wonderful upbringing. And I think that's one of the things that struck me when I came to America. That village wasn't there. And, thank goodness for your mom who welcomed us into her village and, embraced my mom and things like that. But it was something that was like missing. I was like, oh, like, and, you address adults by their first name and things like that. Those were things that like, and no, my little girls, they better not. And exactly. Or, yeah, it's, different, but yeah, so it was definitely different, coming and, seeing your mom and just getting all that love from her and seeing, like I said, my first idea of what an activist was and all of that. But we already chatted about her yesterday. We chatted. So we're talking about you today and, what it was like to grow up with someone like her. And, I appreciate you seeing and recognizing that while just because you're good at something doesn't mean that it's your passion, and recognizing that you have a greater calling. And having that struggle with your advisor and, them thinking they know what's best for you.
Yeah.
I think about, like Michelle Obama in her book and so many influential Black folks that, we know of that, they had struggles with advisors too who thought they should apply to, lesser known schools, to go geared towards certain types of studies, to be geared towards like, as if we are not intelligent enough to understand our own mind and our own passion and our calling. So, after college, you did a bit of traveling. All right, so talk to me where you went and what that was like.
Sure. So I went to further my studies a little bit and try and make the universe my university. The world is our classroom, of course. And I went to Argentina. I went to Vietnam. I went to South Africa, and then I had come home for like a month. And then I spent 4 months in Ghana. And then I came home for like a month again for our Juneteenth festival. I couldn't miss that. And then I went to the Caribbean for 3 weeks to the islands of Antigua, Nevis, and St. Kitts. And all of my studies was trying to learn about Black people around the world, Black folks' impact in Argentina, which is huge. It's the Afro-Brazilian people, who the majority of the enslaved people who were taken from West Africa went to Brazil. So if 100 people were taken from West Africa, 38 of those people would have went to Brazil. That is the largest African population, or the descendants of African people outside of Africa. So I think a lot of times we think of African slaves being brought to America, which they obviously were, but the majority was brought to Brazil and the Caribbean, as I'm sure you know as an island woman as well. But the impact of Black people in Argentina, the Afro-Brazilians, the impact that the American, what we call the Vietnam War, what they call the American War, the impact of what our country had done to Vietnamese people over there. Some of our Black soldiers were involved in that, and just trying to unpack what that means. The history of apartheid in South Africa, and Nelson Mandela and Sarah Baartman, who was a Black woman her body was on display for European people. And I was actually able to go and visit her final resting space in South Africa, which was incredibly powerful. And then again, learning about the impact of colonialism and religion on Ghanaian people now, and learning about the legacy of slavery and the impact of Christopher Columbus, which is obviously, we now understand collectively that Christopher Columbus did not discover anything in this world, but he did have a huge impact on a lot of those Caribbean islands, and the way that he was able to take folks away and take resources away. And it was just a beautiful experience to be able to travel, for one, which I feel like is a privilege, because I can leave this country without fear of not being able to come back inside the country, because I have that privilege of being born in this country. An American passport does something very different than other passports do, as I'm sure we all understand. But I was welcomed into a lot of different spaces, and it was good for me to understand how Blackness works around the world. I think sometimes we get really deeply entrenched in America because we're here, and we know American racism is one way, but in Argentina it was incredibly different to be a Black woman and walking through the space in Argentina. In Vietnam, it was incredibly different because there was no Black people over there. Most folks had never even seen a Black person in real life. So just navigating all of that and what it means to be Black in Ghana, where everyone's Black, so they don't even consider themselves Black. They're Ghanaians, or they're their specific ethnic group or clan. So it was good for me, as someone who's committed to Black freedom, Black liberation, the understanding of our history as Black people, to really understand how Blackness works around different places in the world. So humbling experience.
That is incredible, just to have the opportunity to travel and occupy space as yourself, but seeing what others see and experience in just different levels of treatment in, Argentina, in Vietnam, in the motherland itself. So thank you for sharing that. And if of all the countries that you visited, where would you recommend if someone was trying to get a deep sense of self and pride? Where would you recommend they visit?
It's a really great question. I would say two, only because for me, I went to the slave dungeons in Ghana. they actually call them slave castles, but I don't think it's okay to call them castles because our ancestors were in there for months at a time waiting in cells no bigger than like a room with 400 people in them, and they were just chained to each other. And I saw the door of no return. I walked through it and had the privilege of being able to return when millions of our ancestors went through there and never came back to their homeland in the physical sense. They may have came back, after they had passed on in the physical world, in the spiritual space. But many of them were stolen from their space and never walked back through those doors. And it's an incredibly heavy space to be in. You can't do the things you do to people in that space. Folks were abused in there. Folks were beaten in there. People died in there. You can't do that kind of stuff and energy not still exist. It was heavy the minute I walked in. And so I think for us to better understand our origins and where we come from, Ghana has 3 slave dungeons, 3 different spaces across the coast. And I went to all 3. So I think for us to better understand our origin, that would be a beautiful place for people to visit. But I also think South Africa, because the history of apartheid, because there are white folks who live in South Africa and there are the African traditional people who are there, the poverty is it's like a slum right here and then a mansion right next door. And so the people of South Africa are not confused about their condition. They understand exactly what they need for their liberation, and they are fierce. They are like Black Panthers time 100, in their own space. And I enjoyed learning with a lot of the folks who were my age, who were engaged in freedom fighting in the 21st century. I also think we can't compare it, but it's very humbling because a lot of those spaces are like what I imagine Jim Crow segregation felt like, still to this day. There were a lot of spaces where the Black folks were working and the white folks were sitting, and Black folks don't enjoy those spaces. Of course, I could because I was an American person. I have lighter skin, so I was able to kind of do some things. But for the most part, it was okay for white people to not just outwardly say they don't like Black people. I had a man who refused to talk to me when I was doing a research project because I was Black. He would only address the white students who were on my trip who were asking the questions. It's probably the closest that you will ever get to understanding what Jim Crow segregation may have been like in this country. So I think all of that obviously impacts your understanding of yourself and our history and our people.
Okay. So, wow. I mean, just to go through that experience, and I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, I wish we can all get that experience. And, you leave it with a sense of self, but I also think like just with a sense of pride with what our ancestors went through and that fighting spirit that they have, and they didn't lose hope because I mean, if you felt it just walking through it, hundreds of years later, can you imagine going through it, and still having a spirit that just wasn't broken? So that is incredible. And I'm so glad that you had that experience, and I hope that many people will get that experience because it's funny. You're right. We do get so entrenched with being in America and the American experience, being Black in America, that you go to different parts of the world and some are welcoming and some are less welcoming and things like that. But everywhere you go, it's a different experience. So, all right. So, I know that as a kid, you saw your mom, she put on the celebrations with Bob Marley and Malcolm X. You knew who Nani, who she was, which one of our heroes in Jamaica, Marcus Garvey and all that. You knew all that, where many kids did not have that privilege. So you kind of understood activism and all that. And I'm sure you probably thought I'm going to go here one day. But let's talk about last year, what really galvanized you and kickstarted you to really step out from your mom's shadow and just let everybody see you for the powerful woman that you are. I mean, I'm sure you weren't thinking that at the time. You're not stepping out, well, I'm going to do this, but what galvanized you to act and, react as you did last year?
Sure. I think that not to compare myself to those greats, so to say. I'm a young person, and my feet are in the game. I obviously was right alongside my mom for a lot of different things in this city in regards to organizing. But I'm still young, still have a lot of road to walk. But I think that what often happens is that when Black folks are murdered by the police, folks come out and sort of like sway the energy and dissipate the energy, and use Dr. King's legacy to convince people that they don't need to be mad. They need to just, let it go and let the system prevail, and so on and so forth. And those who choose, who want to bear witness to that mindset are absolutely entitled to do that. Everyone needs to do what makes them feel great in whatever journey they're on. We have to honor. But I think for me, we need something different. We need to hear something different, because this is not just George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and a lot of other people as well over the summer. These are just some of the bigger names, but many people were murdered by the police this summer, and a lot of names folks don't know because, again, they were so wrapped up with George Floyd. But I think it's time for us to really start thinking about what it means for us to take care of each other and returning back to that village mentality in the 21st century, because, there may be some good cops out there, but the fear that Black people walk around with when they have to engage police officers, when a police car pulls up behind you, speaks to something larger that we need to address, which is that we know how to keep each other safe. We know what we need. We know that we need to provide things for ourselves to make sure that we're taking care of each other and keeping each other safe. And so I just feel like, while I appreciate the usual narrative and the usual words that people sort of muster up and conjure for the sake of, addressing police violence and other violences against Black bodies in this country, I think it's time to hear a different message. And I think it's time for the elders to continue to be in place, because we know that the wisdom of the elders is what then, impacts the energy and the movement of young folks. We need that balance of the two. But I think it's time for young people who have always kind of been at the forefront of movements. I was actually just reading about the Black Panther Party, and how Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton were both 21 years old when they founded the Black Panther Party. Fred Hampton was 21 years old when he was murdered by the Chicago police. So he had to have been doing work from the time he was like 16. So young people have always had their pulse on what's going on in our world. And it's important that we allow space for them to share authentically, what they're seeing in our world now, and have the elders sort of support, like how my mom has done and many other people in my village have done, so we can empower young people to start articulating these things and transition this fight that we know is going to continue, that's been happening for 400 years. We got to start getting our young people ready to be able to articulate what's going on.
Absolutely. I think when they pick up that mantle and they march, and they protest and they're involved, like, we've got to get them engaged, because you have to think about it. Each generation teaches the other generation. So if we don't have young people stepping up now, once the elders die out, who's going to carry the mantle? Who's going to tell our story? So it's important that we teach them. It's important that we support them. But, I've been very impressed by this young people of this generation. They're actively involved in, standing up, marching, and, there are the few, and that's fine. There will always be dissenters. But, they're actively involved. They're marching, they're shouting, they're saying that this isn't okay. This is injustice. And I think it's interesting because, it's a social media era, and, so many people are obsessed with being a social media star. And, and I think a lot of people thought that this would miss the young people because they're more involved in that, but kind of overlooking that, like you said, they were 21 years old when they started, but there is always something that pushes you and you're like, no, this must change. You knew it, But then there is a moment that you're like, I'm getting up, I'm getting, even more involved in the fight, and I'm educating, my people to say, let's do this together. So I was very impressed by what you and the young people did over the summer. I was at a few of your, the things that you put on, the marches, laying down on the ground for that 846. And, that was powerful. And I wish that it was reported as such in most of the towns, just the peaceful protest that happens, and like the words that were spoken, like there was so much pain behind it. And they're here in rage. Yes, there is rage because you're constantly being beaten down, and you're constantly being told that you're less than enough, and that, your life doesn't have value. So there is rage. But I think included with that rage, it's like somebody saying, like, have a conscience. Like, have a conscience. We are human beings. For 400 years, we've been here. Enough is enough. Can we just stop? So very impressed with, just some of the marches and the things that you did. And so what are your plans for the future in regards to continuing this fight for social justice and racial equity?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So right now, everything that I do, my family is 100,000% behind, which I have that privilege, and I'm so grateful to be supported by family and village and community and a bunch of people. Folks have put their trust in us and the work that we do. People trust that our story edutainment, me as an individual, my mother as an individual, my aunties born, my brother, that something that we're doing is going to be involved with truth telling, consciousness raising from a place of love. People kind of understand that that's how we walk through the world. So folks put trust in us in the community, and we appreciate that. It's a two-way street. Right now, we are in the process of trying to figure out a headquarters, a building. We need a space. So we were kind of in the works a little bit, trying to figure out a building. Again, my mom has put on all of the programming that she's put on for the good of her children and other children in the community, quite frankly, for the last 15 years out of pocket and out of community support. The Jamaican restaurants have held down our Bob Marley birthday bash and donating food to us every year, even though we don't have money to give necessarily. Somehow someone always brings some ting and some porridge and patties and everything, because folks have been kind of holding us down. So our hope is that we can have a building where we can have other Black folks who are committed to racial justice and, teaching our history all together in a collective. And when something like George Floyd's murder happens and Black people need somewhere to gather, where we can say, maybe that's not the best way to use that rage. I understand why you're mad, and maybe the best way to do it isn't like this. Maybe what we need to do is organize right here in this space and figure out how we're going to move forward together. Right now, Worcester doesn't have that, and it has had that on multiple occasions, but our local government has snuffed out all of those efforts and all of those folks who are trying to organize Black people. So we're going to go for it again, and we're going to have continuing to figure out a building so that we can have youth programming, so that we can get to babies young, so that we can maybe think about a Saturday school, because we know that the public school system is miseducating our children. They're not telling the truth. They honestly might not be equipped. They themselves might not know the truth about African people and Black people in the world, because, it's not taught. So it's important for us, again, to tell our story, and not history, because history is his story, and our story is our story of our people and our greatness. So we're hoping to, again, have that building, be able to expand our programs, do the things that we've done for years, and think of some new things to do as well, to continue raising consciousness for young people, adults, elders, whoever it is that's willing to stand in light and consciousness with us, is what our plan is moving forward.
All right, wonderful. There is just so much to unpack in this. One of the things that you said that struck me was, having your own space. I think that's important, to react authentically without, just the world staring. It's just like to mourn, to cry, and then, get to the action and, channeling that rage, in the right way. I had a conversation with somebody once, and I think, it's not that it's bad. I think it's okay to be angry. But I think when you're just angry, it's easier for people to dismiss you. And they're just angry and move on. But be angry. Then channel that. Because we know that until we, dismantle the system and the processes that were put in place to keep us as slaves, to keep us as less than, we're not going to get anywhere. And being angry alone is unfortunately not going to stop that. We have to be strategic. We have to be organized. We have to have allies in the right places. We have to vote. We have to vote from mayors to district attorneys to, before we even get to president, for the senators, the one that, did that second acquittal. We're going to leave that, things like that. We vote for these people and we vote for them by not voting. So then they're able to go into the Senate, and do these things that doesn't represent us because we didn't give a voice. We didn't have a voice. So it's just, and I like the younger generation here, they understand that concept and, they're turning up and they're voting. And because we want people in place that serves not just one group, but serves all. And oftentimes we're the group that is not served. So like I said, a lot there to unpack and also important. So tell me, let's tell the viewers, what is our story edutainment? We have talked about it over and over throughout this. We've mentioned it. What is our story edutainment for those, and how can they find out information about it?
Sure. So our story edutainment, again, this is the 15 years, now 16, 17-year work that my mother created that I inherited when I graduated from college in 2019. So again, our belief is that history is his story, and that's typically, white folks' understanding of our history, which is usually very untrue. And there's an African proverb that says, as long as the story of the hunt glorifies the hunter, like we'll never know the story of the lion and the sheep and the tiger and so on and so forth. And for a long time, the dominant culture, white folks have been the hunters and we have been the hunted. And so our history is not told right at all. But we also understand that young people are not necessarily going to want someone to sit talking at them. I sometimes don't want people to sit talking at me, and I understand the value in that. And so we choose to edutain people. So we educate folks through entertainment. So we might use a poem, we might use a performer, we might use a video, whatever we can use to get the message across, so that you're being entertained, and sometimes we snuck the knowledge in for you. You didn't even know you were getting it, and there it is, and it's resonating 2 years later, maybe, I don't know. But again, the belief is that in helping us better understand ourselves, the term knowledge of self to better yourself. We know that we have to understand our history and our root and where we come from, all the way back to Africa. There's no way to know exactly where we're from, but we know we are the descendants of West African people in this country. And we have an obligation to know our history and to know our stories. And it's important for us to bring that forward in the events that we do and the programming that we do. Folks who want to get connected with us right now, we're mainly on Facebook right now because we've been doing, like so many others, switching over with COVID from our large in-person big events that are usually so beautiful and have like 100 people there. We obviously can't do with COVID safely. So we've been on Facebook trying to do our programming virtually like so many others. So the best way to get in touch with us would be on Facebook. If you do our story, OUR story, and then edutainment, which is EDUTINMENT, edutainment. On Facebook, that's probably the best way to get in touch with us. And you can send us a message, like the page. We share our events and other events that we know that are going on locally that, we think folks should support as well.
Wonderful. You have an event happening today, right?
Yes, we do. We have an event today. It is this is the first part of our Sankofa series, and keep showing off my little shirt here, but this is the Sankofa bird, and it's an Adinkra symbol, which is from the Akan people of what is now Ghana. But of course, we know that those borders, those 54 countries that we know of Africa now, there was never any borders back in the day. That's relatively new in world history. So this is what we know as Ghana, but the Akan people did not call it Ghana. But they have a number of symbols. This is one of our favorites, and it's the bird whose body is facing forward, but the head is facing backwards, and it literally means go back and fetch it. So it means you have to know your history, you have to know where you've come, you have to know the steps that have already been walked so you don't repeat that same history and waste time and energy and resources. We can just keep building on what our ancestors have done. So this first series is today, Valentine's Day, at 1 p.m. And we're going to be talking about our West African origins and our history before we were enslaved people. The next Sunday, we'll be talking about the Mafa, which is the Swahili term for the Middle Passage. And then talking about chattel slavery and rebellions, the way we rebelled against what was going on. And then our third session will be talking about what it means to be Black in the 21st century, what this looks like for us now, and how do we move forward with all our history. So 3 really great sessions every Sunday in Black History Month, even though Black History is 365. But
24/7. All right. All right, wonderful. No, that's awesome, and I'm glad that folks will have an opportunity to learn about, learn the history, things they didn't know about, things that are not taught. And one of the things you had said earlier when you had answered a previous question, you said it's not taught in school, and you know what? Because truthfully, most of the teachers they don't know it themselves because they weren't taught it. So how can you teach what you don't know, right? So I'm hoping that at one point it will get easier, or not say easier, it will become necessary, normal, common for folks to learn our history, and because it's a part of history, it's not separate. So yeah, but I think to tell it truthfully, they would have to tell all the atrocities. And folks aren't often not prepared to tell the atrocities because their version for years has been different. So I see you have a little friend in the camera there.
Nala. She is my little kitten, and Nala means empress or beloved one, or the queen. She's the queen of the house.
All right now. All right. Well, there's a lot of queens over there. Okay. All right. Awesome. So there is another organization that you are a part of that kind of got birthed, Black Families Together. Let's talk about what that is.
Sure, definitely. So Black Families Together was formed, again, this George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor energy that was kind of happening. There was a number of different people doing things in small ways. There was a group called Coaches for Change who were trying to engage young people about Black Lives Matters through sports. There was the Worcester Voter Rights Initiative who was trying to engage young Black people in voting, trying to get more Black folks registered to vote. We were having Black community gatherings at Green Hill Park for Black folks to unpack, how they were feeling. So a number of different things were going on. And we decided, instead of folks usually do, you do your thing over here, and I, we don't know all the work going on. We all decided to come together and share the work we were doing so that we could all be on the same page. So if a young brother comes to me and says he's into basketball, I can send him that way. We don't have to be the experts of everything. There can be someone else who is an expert in this, and I can be the expert in this, and you can be the expert in this, and we can just share, because it's not about power or ego when we're organizing. It's about getting folks conscious together by whatever means. So that's how we had started. And then we invited Black folks to kind of get on these calls and organize these different platforms that we know need to be addressed in our community. And for the last almost 8-9 months, we've established some demands specifically around education and police violence, as those were the hot things that we could kind of move on because the energy nationally was demanding accountability. So we've been meeting with Black folks every first and third Monday, and a lot of different folks come and have conversation and try and build on our platforms. And then we've had meetings with the chief of police, the city manager, the superintendent, the mayor, some of the folks who need to be held accountable by Black folks in the city for their failure to show up for us the way that they need to. How that's going is a different story because folks are resistant to change, period, but especially when it comes to Black folks are hesitant and reluctant and always willing to push back and not always willing to listen, especially when you come from a place of power and privilege and you've never had to understand what it's like to walk through the world as a Black person, a Black woman, especially as we know that dual oppression of womanhood and Blackness, though it is our greatness, in society, means that we impact dual oppression. So for folks who have never experienced that, it's really hard for them to wrap their head around why we're demanding more Black teachers, why Black folks are demanding that the police be removed from our school, why Black folks are demanding that we have a civilian review board, have police oversight where the community is able to decide if that police officer should keep their job or not. They can't wrap their head around that just yet, but we're also not willing to let go of any of our demands. This is what Black folks wanted, so we're doing what we can to push for that to happen.
It's time.
Mm-hmm.
It's time. And you are right. You're correct when you're asking folks to examine their beliefs, and when they realize that their beliefs has been wrong. Unfortunately, their reaction is to hold on for dear life, and just shut out the thought, the existence of other things, because then they may have to examine that their parents were wrong, their grandparents were wrong, their aunts and their uncles were wrong. But I've always believed that if your belief system, and against any race, if your belief system is the oppression and the persecution of any race, gender, or class of people, you need to examine it. And you're wrong, because it's wrong. Like, there should not be one over the other. So, like I said, I think the racial reckoning that is happening now, it's that we're saying to folks, see us as human beings, see us just as powerful, and it touches their place of privilege. And, then they'll be like, well, I'm not privileged. I've worked for everything. And I think they're deliberately misunderstanding because they don't want to. I refuse to think that it's ignorance. They can't. I think it's they don't want to. So when, again, you're questioning their beliefs and, things like that, and they're comfortable, you're comfortable. I talked about, I interviewed a young lady the other day, and, she happened to be Caucasian. We talked about white privilege and things like that, and why folks were triggered when, you say Black Lives Matter, and they have to, respond, Our Life Matters and Blue Life Matters, and, all of that. And, she talked about a come to Jesus moment that she had. She was driving in a car with her kids, and, she had gotten pulled over, and she was kind of like, how dare they treat me like that? And, things like that. And, all she was like pulled over and things like that. And she wasn't pulled out of her car, and, things like that. And, it took her a moment for her to realize, like, felt like, and how some folks, when they're treated unfairly, they're treated like they're Black folks. And like, wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've seen it with again, the former occupant of the White House, his fanatics, in airport, one of the gentlemen yelling, when the police attacked him, was like, you're treating me like a Black person. And, these things just, wow. You're like, really?
Which that statement to me right here, it's like, so that means what's going on when you say you're treating me like
exactly.
a Black person. It's like,
you
how
do.
people are being treated, and you don't want it for yourself, clearly, by what you're saying. And that means you gotta, why would you allow it to happen to somebody else if you don't want that for yourself and your children and your people?
There it is.
Tells me what's going on, and you gotta do what you gotta do to use your privilege to
exactly. And that's why I believe that it's not they don't know. It's just they choose not to. So, so much going on. And I am looking every day to see, what's happening. And I think that there's definitely movement. And I think there's a lot of people right now that are holding folks accountable, as you guys are doing. The people that are in positions of power, the people that are in positions of influence, they need to be held accountable. They need to be called out, and they need to acknowledge that, okay, we have done this long enough. It's time we do better.
Yep.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm so excited by, what you guys are doing, just watching you guys and seeing you guys just step in, unapologetic, and claiming your space, claiming your voice, and just owning your power. I love it, love it, love it. I watched the Bob Marley event virtually the other day. Yes, and you are correct. You guys do sneak in the knowledge in there while you're being entertained, you are also being educated. So I love that.
Yes.
The funny thing is I've been doing the Bob Marley events for a while. I was host, you're my little helper for a very long time. And, seeing it come full circle is just a phenomenal thing. And I learned so much about Bob at those events. And I'm from Jamaica. Bob's from Jamaica. And I knew a lot of things about Bob, but I learned so much every time there's an event. I think you guys are challenged to find something new about Bob.
Yes,
So
every year.
every year. So how do you find something new about one of the most well-known entertainers, right? Because his life was an open book. But
Yep.
every year you guys rise to the challenge and you do it. You bring something new for Bob and new videos and things like that. And this year was beautifully done.
Yep.
Virtually enjoyed it. I had to get off at when I got to work at 1, but it was very, very nice. So yeah, all right. Well, I am so grateful that you came on. I'm so grateful that I had an opportunity to share this space with you. I'm so grateful that I'm a part of your village, and because your mom invited me in a very long time ago, and once you're in, you're in. So we ain't leaving. So, I just wish that more villages would be formed. I just wish that all across America right now and across the world, maybe, I'm not sure what it's like in other areas, but I know there are villages in Jamaica that Black folks just realize it takes a village. We're ones in need and you have abundance, share that resource and things like that, because everybody is everybody's mothers. We're mothers. We are Mother Earth, and, give that knowledge and things like that. All right. So as we are wrapping up, what else would you like to share, Miss Phenomenal Woman, the youngest phenomenal woman? Oh, all right. Making history here. Yay, 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 yay. What would you like to share? What would you like folks for us to know about you?
I think I would just like to, I would like to encourage people, because again, in folks who are engaged in consciousness raising and moving and shaking, our hope is to always impact people and continue guiding folks on that path to consciousness, whatever it looks like for people. But I would love to encourage folks to continue to just don't eat the cookies that they're giving us. Cookies are my favorite. I love sweets, but there is poison in the cookies if we don't understand what is going on in our worlds, and if we don't understand our positionality, which is a fancy word to say how I'm read is different than how you're read. As someone with an accent, as a Black woman, we're both Black women, but you have darker skin than me. It means that in our system, the way things are set up, because we understand that it's racism, we understand that it's colorism, we understand that it's national origin, we understand it's religion, it's all of these different compounding things that impact the way that we're viewed in the world. And so I encourage people to better understand where they lie, in our society's stratification of people. I'm a Black woman. I have those two oppressions, but I'm formally educated. So that means I have more privilege than my grandfather, who only completed second grade. It means that, the structure sees me different. As someone who is formally educated, I'm more valuable than someone who didn't go to college. It means that I'm not a queer person. I'm not a transgender person. It means I have a different privilege, than other people in our world. And I hope that we can all, from a place of deep love, better understand how we move through spaces, how systems read us, how people read us, and use the privileges that we have in order to continue lifting from the bottom and creating a better world for those at the very bottom of our societal heap, because we know who they are, and we know when you lift from the bottom, everyone inherently lifts up. When Black folks changed the Civil Rights Act of 1964, women had to come up. Latinx folks had to come up off of Black folks doing what they needed to do for Black folks, but everyone inherently comes up when you're organizing centers. Black people who are at this point, because of our white supremacist world, are at the bottom. When folks center women and transgender people, when folks center those who don't have a lot of money in our society, when we center those who are the most at the bottom, we're doing the work that needs to be done for collective healing and to uplift everyone. So I hope that folks can continue to read and continue to educate themselves. Come on board with our story entertainment if you're having a hard time doing that, and we'll try our best to guide you the right way. But we really have an obligation, again, as I usually say and close things out, to the ancestors, to those who came before us, to those who put down the railroad tracks, knowing that they would not see the train come through. Harriet Tubman knew she was not going to see the end of slavery, and she still freed 300 people and went back into slavery 19 times to free people. Queen Nanny, she wasn't necessarily enslaved. She was free because she was a maroon, but she's like the island version of our Harriet. And these are people who I'm sure did not think they were going to see the world they wanted to see, and they still chose to act. And we have an obligation to honor our ancestors and to make a way for 3 generations down the line, the folks that I probably won't meet. We have an obligation to do all we can in the ways that we can to honor those who came before us and make a way for those who have yet to even be born. And so I encourage everyone to do what they can to keep this, the railroad track being built. So when the train does come through, we can say we did our part, because it's going to come. Justice doesn't wait for nobody. It's going to come.
It has to. It has to. Well, thank you so much, Medina. I thoroughly enjoyed our chat. As always, normally it's a lot less formal, right? There's not a mic and a camera pointed at us. Although actually, Bob Marley Bash, some of them were televised, but we were just doing our thing. So.
Babies running around. And everybody just running around and food being
it was just incredible. It was just, those memories just live on. And sometimes I see the pictures. At one point I was pregnant.
I was thinking about the belly. I was like, how little Miss Suzanne had the belly in the Bob Marley shirt.
I did. It was stretched so tight, but I'm like, I'm getting into this shirt today.
I remember.
Oh my goodness. I had some good times. My village is good. So,
Yes.
I know you have a lovely village. There's so many people in your village that, and village, you don't have to be related by blood. So I love that. And, the future generation, I definitely think there's going to be a lot of things they're doing that we didn't think of. And that's it. It's educate and teach the next and do all you can to empower your people. And it's funny to me that people don't realize if the people that are at the bottom are risen up and they're wealthy and prosperous and healthy, then the ones that were at the top will only go higher. But I think people think that if you help the bottom, then they're going to flip. It doesn't mean that. You're not going to go to the bottom. Like, white folks are not going to go to the bottom, So
things are so uneven that there's no way that would even happen.
It can't.
100 and they're at 1, getting them to 25 would do nothing to you.
It can't. It's just like we can all eat. We're not going to run out of stuff. And I say this because I do my positive thing. And I say, there is room and space for everybody to shine, to eat and things like that. But some folks are just so held on. Exactly.
On the self, get my bag, eat my bread, just worry about me. And that's not our nature at all. We've always been people who work for the village.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I say to my siblings all the time, I want all of us to be prosperous. I want all of us to do well, whether it's so y'all don't sleep on my couch, but no. That's what I said. So me and my brother Cliff, we were talking about it the other day, and we were like, no, I really do. I want to look around and see folks doing well. And it's an island thing too. It's kind of like, when Usain Bolt, oh my goodness, is running across that field, like every Jamaican is cheering like they helped raise him with his mama. So, that's it. I just would love to see just more communities being birthed and just coming together and just push forward and educating and just loving on folks. That's it. All right. Well, I thank you. You guys are the future. I'm looking forward to more things coming from you guys. And we will, oh my goodness, I don't want to call myself, the elder, but I think I might be.
Making that transition into, we created a space for olders.
Yes.
My mom called calls herself as an older. She says she's not an elder yet, but
Thank
she's
you.
an older.
Thank you very much.
Yes, another government.
Okay, so as part of the older, thank you there, because the elders was kind of sitting funny.
Transition.
Yes, yeah. One day, well, and I think it's a respect too, because for me, elders is so
Yeah.
like I don't think I'm an elder, and it's not even a conceit thing. It's just that there's so much to learn from the elders. You sit at their feet and you learn and you absorb. And I think I'm still learning and growing and things like that. So I'll take the older. So I'm so proud of you, young lady. Just so proud of everything and just being able to see your phenomenal journey and knowing that you're just getting started and will be here to support you in all that you do. All right. Wonderful. So thank you for coming on. All right, guys. So this was the Sit Down with Suzanne podcast, the second in the Phenomenal Woman series, Miss Lovely Medina. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. We are on iTunes, we are on iHeart, we're on Pandora, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon, like on every single platform. I cannot remember them all. The video will be up on YouTube. Subscribe, share, like. If you have a story that you want told, you're welcome to reach out to me at Suzanne@positivelysuzanne.com. And as always, I hope that you were inspired. I hope that you were motivated. And I hope that you were empowered. And until next time, this is Suzanne signing off.